Hi, Jenny.
Hi.
Nice to meet you. So I have with me Jenny Graham. She is running for state legislature position 2 in District 6. Jenny, you're up for re-election, and just tell us a little bit about yourself, what you've been doing in the legislature, and how your campaign's going.
Well, I want to thank your listeners for taking the time today to watch this and to learn a little bit more about each of us as candidates. My strengths come in the public safety arena. When I think about why Jenny stepped up to run for office, the story really is kind of a little humorous when you think about it. Because honestly, I was going in the other direction as far and as fast as I could. But there was something in front of me that no matter which way I turned, it was there. I did not seek out politics. Politics found me when I was dealing with the situation after my sister was tragically murdered by the Green River serial killer.
Oh, wow.
And it took 20 years for them to catch the murderer, which means that I didn't have access to those records. And it was a day, as a matter of fact, the anniversary of finding Debbie's remains was May 30th. So we just passed that. And
I'm sorry to hear about that.
yeah. So her birthday's coming up September 7th, and the anniversary of her murder is September 20th. So, this is, that never goes away. It's here, and I can't bring her back. I can't bring the other victims back that I knew either that he killed. Mm-hmm. So it's not just my sister. I knew others. I can't do anything to bring them back, but I have really worked hard to, before I decided to run for office, turn over every rock, every stone, looking for answers to the questions that I had. How did this happen? What can we do to try to stop this from other families going through this? And one day I made a cold call to a detective with the Green River Task Force and asked if I might be able to see my sister's files because her case was solved. And the detective made a split-second decision and allowed me to see those files. And when I spent about 3 weeks at the Major Crimes Unit. And when I was looking through those files, there was information in there that I didn't realize that other people knew. I didn't realize that in our case that the schools had reported abuse, that there was police reports from abuse. There were neighbors that had sent information in. As far as I knew, it was just my word against nobody else's. And that's a real hard position for a kid to be in. So again, it was long after Debbie was murdered in 82. So this was it was 1988. 2008 when I actually did get to go in there and read through those files. So, that's a long time. And when I was looking through there, I was recognizing, I was asking questions that were naturally going to come up. And the answers that I was getting was, well, we have statutes of limitations. I was talking about child sexual assault. And, I was being told there's statutes of limitations, basically for most people, a year to report. And it didn't matter why they didn't report. It didn't matter if your life was threatened. None of it mattered. If you did not report within a year, that rapist went free. And it didn't matter how much proof you had, because in my case, that's still there, more proof in the old case than a lot of the new cases. And it dawned on me, it really kind of hit me hard, that we have a segment of our population that was being denied a fair hand in our justice system. That kids that go through that are kids. They're not adults. And until they get into a safe position physically, emotionally, spiritually, where they can face that, they're not going to be able to do it. And they're not going to process things or do things like an adult would.
Right.
So I, was asking the question, why hadn't somebody done something to fix this? Clearly it was wrong. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to do this. Something needs to be done. Somebody should have done this. They didn't do it. I was a child, couldn't do anything. Now I'm an adult. I have a voice. So I'm going to step up and I'm going to do what's right. So as a mom and as a sexual assault survivor, I decided that I was going to work on this. It took 2 years out of my life, working 18 out of 24 hours a day on my dime, going back and forth to Olympia. So it was definitely a hard battle. It was pretty much carved in stone. It wasn't going to change, and I would not accept that. So we did have to reinvent the wheel. We did have to figure out a way to make this happen. And I was working with other victims from SNAP, the SNAP group, and we all ended up coming together to do what needed to be done. And, this was not going to be retroactive. So the way that bill worked is, the people that are doing this get fair warning. This is a hard line in the sand. If you decide that you are going to assault a child, be aware you are not hiding behind an unfair timeline. Mm-hmm. So don't do it. I just thought my goal wasn't to put anybody in jail. It was to protect the kids who have to, if they don't have adults that are standing up for them, they don't have a chance. So, that was pretty much me in my life as a martial arts instructor. It was the same thing. I always gravitated towards the kids that I saw that were not really coordinated, that weren't really sure of themselves, because they're going to be the first ones that the predators are going to target. And I knew that. So I wasn't their mom, but I was a mom. And I had some experience with that. And then, we were able to get the law passed. And then I spent a couple of years working to meet my sister's killer, because I had questions that he had the answers to. And that was another 2-year fight. So, but again, every odd against me carved in stone, that wasn't going to happen. But it did. And I am a better person for doing it. It was about my healing. It was about what I needed. Mm-hmm. It was about getting the questions answered that I needed answered, because the police didn't answer those during the plea bargain. So I thought, well, I can do this. I'm strong enough to do this. And if it works out for me to do it, this is what I need. Right. So it happened, and it was a good result.
So did you see immediately after you got that passed? So what's the trend been in these issues of sexual assault? Has the trend gone down since the passing of that the law to lift the statute of limitations?
So I'm glad that you're asking that question. I would have to try to compare from when I was doing it then to now, and I don't have those figures with me. What I can tell you now, from having been in the legislature for a couple of years, that, there's been some legislation that's been passed to help sexual assault survivors, which is good. I believe that is something that we should be working, because those crimes don't care what political party you belong to. They don't care. And it's something we should all care about. The issue that we're running into, though, is we can pass every bill we want when it comes to the sexual assault stuff. But on the back end, if they are working to reduce those penalties by 50%, by 30%, the message gets out pretty quickly that you can, and we've also seen the change, not only that they're reducing the time, but they've been pushing through these really ridiculous and unfair expectations for least restrictive alternative. So least restrictive alternative for a violent sex offender, we're talking about an ankle bracelet that's not monitored in real time. We have a serious problem. I mean, they've put out this false belief that these ankle bracelets are a great substitute for somebody being in jail where they cannot make more victims. And, I could maybe see more value in it if it functioned the way that most people expect that it would function. And that would be that if we don't want to pay for them to be in jail, if they're going to go back home to a residence, maybe with a family member or something, and they leave that residence and an alarm goes off, so we can have somebody attend to that, that's great, but that's not what's happening. I remember I had a conversation with Sheriff Ozzie not too long ago, and he mentioned that they had a guy that stole 10 cars while he was wearing one of those bracelets. He ended up cutting it off. But still, again, it happens.
You translate that to raping 10 women, and where are we?
Well, right. They cut that off. Because it did happen while this was McNeil Island that we were fighting this, because these are violent sexual predators that they were fighting to let out on least restrictive alternatives into our neighborhoods. And we're already the worst in the nation for police per capita when you pick up the phone to call 911. And then you add the defund the police on top of it. We were facing that seriously. What was going on in Seattle is they weren't being able to investigate new rape cases because they don't have the officers. They're having to take detectives to put them on the 911 calls. We can't have it both ways. We have the officers that are out that are answering those 911 calls, but we still have to have other professionals that once they get the information and everything, now they can investigate these cases and it goes from there. But if we don't have those detectives because now they're being put on other cases, that's a problem.
We don't need a detective answering 911 calls. We need them responding to the 911 calls.
Right. So in one way, I can see, where we have made strides. There was a bill that got passed that had to do with domestic violence. I think the lady's name was Tiffany Hall, maybe. She was murdered. Her kids were in the car. This was Western Washington. And they knew that the husband was going to kill her. It was just how do we protect her? And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. He ended up killing her with her kids and her mother in the car. It was awful. So there's a bill that got passed to put electronically, it would warn the victim if somebody had a restraining order and they came within so many feet of them, right, to be able to get away. That's the whole premise of that. But I'm going to ask the question, and I voted for the bill because I believe that, we should be whatever precautions that we can, especially in those cases, those violent cases, that something is done, whatever we can do to try and protect those crime victims. But I'm also asking the question, why are we not stepping up when it comes to the people that are emboldened and enabled to continue to do these crimes? Because they don't fear the police. They don't fear judges. They don't fear our courts.
Right.
They don't fear accountability. That we've gotten to a point where there was a 911 call that I listened to on the news where they were playing, a criminal that was in a stolen car and had a woman with them that, they were, I think it was a girlfriend and there was some domestic violence involved with that. But he was on the phone with the 911 telling them to call the police officer behind him and let him know that he can't pursue him, that it's against the law. And he is listing off the Democrat-sponsored and passed legislation that says you as officers cannot pursue me in this stolen car, or, under this other situation. So we did not get here, just because. There's been bad policy year after year after year that's being passed that is getting softer and softer and softer on the people that and it's a choice. The people that are doing these things, they know exactly what they're doing. And even if you were to go back and say, well, the person's mentally ill or whatever, that is still not a green light to do what they're going to do. If they are that mentally ill that they have no idea what they're doing, I'm sorry, they still need to be managed.
Right.
That does not give them the right to continue to go out and make more victims, especially when they're violent, persistent offenders. And that's what we're seeing right now. This is the battle that I see happening right now, is that not only is there the push to get them out earlier, but then there's also the push when they're committing more of these crimes that they just keep getting out. And there's even been more legislation passed that if they consider them to be indigent, that there's not going to be any restitution for the crime victims that they create. They're not going to have to pay it. If a judge says that they don't have to pay it, they don't have to pay it. And I mean, I am seeing this so much. In Spokane, we had that happen. A woman attacked in a crosswalk, hurt really bad, a nurse. And it turns out that they ended up telling her that they were not going to press charges because the person wasn't competent to stand trial. So they sent him to Eastern State Hospital instead, where he promptly murdered somebody the same way that he attacked her, fractured his skull. And then, you know, when I talked to the woman, and she was just absolutely devastated and in tears, she said he had 5 violent felonies before he did this to me. So that means now the nurse gets to pay for all of her medical bills. She misses work, and that's providing she can even go back to work, because some of these attacks are so violent that it changes people's lives forever. And in reality, what ends up happening, and that we're seeing this more and more, that they say they're not competent to stand trial, but they never end up going to trial. They just end up letting them out. Right?
And it's like you said, this hasn't just happened overnight. I mean, we have less and less institutional asylums for people with mental health disorders, because that was policy that's been passed over the last 40, 50 years, where, it's not okay to keep people in asylums when they're clearly showing signs of disorder. And so you have that, and it's like, well, what's the alternative? We now have them on the street living and freezing to death because now we don't have that infrastructure.
Right. Or being victimized, not getting their medicines.
Yes.
And see, let's talk about compassion. Okay, because we have 2 different definitions of compassion right now that are dueling. You've got the side that thinks that it's mean to house somebody in need, whether it's short-term or long-term, that their rights are being violated. So they look at it as being compassionate to let them go and live their life. Well, that's great if they're capable of being able to do that. But if they can't take care of themselves, you're taking away a roof over their head, food, medicine, the ability to maybe be able to work, and live a life where they're not going to be victimized out on the street, because they also, end up having a lot of violent crime happen against them. Right. And I'm sorry, I don't look at that as being compassion at all.
No, I mean, how is it compassionate when you have people who are freezing to death on the streets that need mental health help, but don't want to ask for it? It's, at what point can we step in and just say, hey, you really need help and we can help you?
Well, and that's the point, though, because right now, and that was also going on in the legislature, where you have those of us that genuinely want, and so many people that I meet, whether it's at the door, businesses, people are good people. They want to help. If somebody's genuinely in need, then let's help them, right? I mean, most people that I know are on board with that. But when that same person can decide to just walk out, they need the help, but they can just decide to walk out. We're not going to get anywhere with that, because it's human nature to do what's easy. And if somebody has an addiction or other things that they're dealing with, I've never been in those shoes, But I'm going to imagine that's pretty hard, getting that poison out of your body. And then once you do, you have to face whatever mentally caused you to start self-medicating to begin with, right? So, and I'm hopeful that we absolutely do have, I think, other options. There was something that I supported as a legislator. We came up with money to help the police if there was somebody that was struggling. Like if you go to the hospital, they triage you before they send you, here, or here. They need to find out what are your issue, what are your needs. And that's what this particular program did. Instead of sending them to jail, which they may not have the ability to triage them the best there, there's a different area that they were able to go. It had 16 beds on one side that were short term, 16 beds on another side that were a little longer term, but there was also medical help there. So if they were coming down off of drugs or something, they didn't have to move them from place to place to place, so they could get them stabilized, right? And then when their minds are clear and, they can start thinking about some things, then, we have that set up where we can say, okay, well, here's resources here for you to be able to go to, and we can start moving them in that direction, which I think is a good idea. It does not absolve them of any crimes, though, that they commit, because that's the other thing that we're seeing is it's coming up. Well, they were mentally ill, so they're not responsible for what they did, or they were on drugs, so they're not responsible for what they did, and I do not support that. I'm sorry. I've worked with developmentally disabled people as a ski coach. There are some not doing that particular program, right? Because they wouldn't be able to. If they can't function, they're not going to be able to do something like that. And I can tell you, I worked with adults, and I worked with teenagers, and I worked with younger kids, and they can be just as manipulative as anybody else.
Sometimes even more so, yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about, so we'll go to question 12 on the survey. We touched a little bit about law and order and backing the police and bad policies. So let's talk about the poor and needy, because I think we kind of got into this a little bit.
Yeah.
And so our statement is that providing a safety net for the poor and needy is the responsibility of individuals, families, churches, and local communities. It is not the responsibility of the government, which primarily exists to protect citizens from foreign and domestic threats. Those who are able should be encouraged to work because the satisfaction of the fruit of their labor, regardless of how minimal or mundane, it is dignifying and life-giving. The issue application is that many metropolitan areas have a growing problem with homelessness, which is often connected to drug addiction and mental health issues. Local government officials should focus on protecting the safety of all citizens by enforcing regulations against public disturbance, trespassing, and loitering. The response is that government officials should leave the provisions of housing, rehabilitation, and other social services to individuals, families, and private organizations that are better equipped to directly help the homeless. Additionally, local officials should support law enforcement with proper funding, good faith negotiations, and responsible accountability. And you responded a 5 right in the middle, and you said, I'm meeting you in the middle. I agree with local control and local solutions most of the time. There has to be, however, collaboration and accountability to make sure the funding is going where it's intended to best help. Right. Less government is better. However, that means the people must step up as the boss of the government to be the change they want to see. These bad situations did not happen quickly. They happen one bad policy at a time while good people are distracted or not paying attention to answer a call to action. Every voice and individual matter in the battle for good over evil. And so we've really touched on quite a few of these issues. And, you make some great points. But there are people who choose a life of lawlessness, and so there are people who have mental illness that need help and support, and maybe they do, maybe they don't know what they're doing. I'm a firm believer, Ted Bundy was not a dumb person. He was a sociopath, but he knew exactly what he was doing, and he knew it was evil.
Right.
He knew it was wrong.
Right.
But he said, I couldn't stop myself.
Right.
I just had to give in to my compulsion. But he knew even though he had no moral compass, that it was wrong and it was evil. He's on record saying so. So,
That's the part we don't talk about, though.
Right.
See, we talk about drug addiction, we talk about mental illness, but we don't talk about the psychopaths that I am sorry, they do exist. They enjoy hurting or killing other people.
Or preying on homeless that are weak and defenseless.
It is something that they get a rush off of. That is a human component that it is what it is. If we had a lion, that was running rampant in the streets, killing people, well, that is the lion's nature, right? That's a lion's nature.
Yep.
They do not. They aren't human. They don't have the brains that we do to think and reason. And by the time they're an adult, they know the difference between right and wrong. That way, that is the one thing that stops them from putting their hand on a hot stove or walking directly out into traffic. Why don't they do those things? Because they learned that it hurts them.
Right.
Right. But they did. There are some, and again, when they're victimizing people, and they know what crying is, they know what pain is. They can hear that person saying, "Please stop that. That hurts. Please stop. I'm scared. Please don't hurt me. Please don't kill me. I don't want to die." They can hear those things. They can see how their victim is reacting, and they don't care.
It almost aggregates. It almost aggravates them more.
Right. Yeah, in some. I can't say that for all, but, I mean, I've been around the block a few times and I can tell you, obviously, that I don't know if there might be some of your viewers that have read the book, The Glass Castle. There's a book out called The Glass Castle, and it talks about, I think the woman was a newscaster or something along those lines, author or something, and she grew up with her parents being homeless and, moving from place to place, and I guess they lived in a house that they didn't really keep up very much, but it just kind of talked about the choices that her parents made as adults, and when she grew up and moved away and now as an adult could start making her own decisions for her life, she did. But the parents kept that. And the parents actually looked at everybody else being the ones that have the problems, right? They didn't want to work. They didn't want to be responsible. They would go into take whatever it is they wanted. And, again, we have rules in our society because imagine what it would be like if everybody was not working and just doing what it is they wanted and taking whatever it is they felt like. I mean, that would be an absolute nightmare.
And we've also almost conceded this to be true because when you talk about unemployment rates and people talk about the rate of unemployment and they give you the percentages, they say, 5% is about good. And it's, well, what do you mean good? That's 5% people who either don't want to work or can't work. So What do we mean? Good, and there are a lot of people that do that. But I think the bigger thing in your analogy is that people who want to do harm to others, they're not looking at themselves like they have the problem. They're looking at everyone else like they have the problem.
Right.
And so I think that was the message, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, that you were saying is...
Well, it's like I sat in a parole hearing for Timothy Pauly, who is a convicted mass murderer. The family invited me to sit through that, and I hadn't sat through one of those before. So it was quite a learning experience for me to see how the crime victims and their families are treated, which was horrific. Horrific. The murderer had an attorney. The murderer had a counselor. The murderer had 5 people on that board who are accountable to nobody but Governor Inslee, making the decision whether that guy got out of jail or not. Now, he had life without the possibility of parole because it was armed robbery, and he thought that he'd killed 5 people when he walked out of there. 2 accidentally survived, but during that listening to this parole hearing, this man was justifying what he did by saying that it was his PTSD that made him do it. Okay. And his PTSD consisted of him hurting his arm at work. So he got his arm caught in a machine, and yeah, it caused him pain. But I'm going to tell you what really hit me while I was watching that. This guy justifying what it was that he did by saying that he had PTSD and didn't know why he did it. But I will tell you what he didn't talk about. He did not talk about what he put those people through. 2 hours of torture, hanging women and tying up the men and shooting them in the head. That man did not mention one word about having any post-traumatic stress for that. What he did to those people, killed them. There was no apology. There was no accountability whatsoever. It was somebody else's fault. And there was not a shred of emotion from that man.
And that's more traumatic than hurting your arm in a machine at work. I would think so.
I think most people would agree with that.
Well, I think it's...
But here's the thing. Hurting his machine, his arm in the machine, hurt him.
Him, right.
The other people were the ones on the receiving end of cruel and unusual punishment, right? But he wasn't feeling that. They were. So once again,
Well, I guess then they should be able to justify killing him because they have post-traumatic stress disorder, knowing what their families went to. So then I guess that gives them justification to kill him.
Actually, what this family is facing, so when the board voted to let this guy out with an ankle bracelet for 90 days as his supervision, remember we talked about that, they asked, well, what do we do if we run into this guy in Costco? Can we get a restraining order? No, you can't. He hasn't broken the law. And the fact that he tried to kill you and killed your husband doesn't matter. He would have to try to hurt you again, or maybe succeed this time before we would do anything to help you. And I don't think that's right.
How long was he actually in prison for?
I think 30 years or something. Not as far as I'm concerned, for what he did, not enough.
Right.
We need to have life without the possibility of parole for people like that who do not care about what they do to other people.
Right.
That is going to be the first person that's going to do this again, and it's going to be on the backs of the crime victims and their families. We knew that person was dangerous. And there were people in the legislature fighting to let that man out under least restrictive alternatives, while at the same time they're passing legislation that I read in committee saying neither the state, its agents, or its employees can be criminally or civilly held accountable unless the crime victims can prove gross negligence. So I don't think most people are going to be able to do that. And if it can be proven to be gross negligence, it's still the taxpayers that have to pay that lawsuit.
Right.
Right? And I mean, we should have facilities because it's our responsibility when somebody is proven to be dangerous, especially when they're persistent offenders, that we've got to do something to be able to manage them, to let them live their life however to the best of their ability, but they do not have a God-given, nature-given, or constitutional right to get out and make more victims.
What's the motive here? Why are we even letting someone whose conviction is life without parole? Why is he even sitting in front of the board? What's the end game here? Why are they allowing this to happen?
Well, I'll tell you that I fought very hard to stop Senate Bill 5036, which is to end life without the possibility of parole. Respectively, it's pretty much going to do exactly that. But here's the thing with that. What it said is that everybody would have the ability to be able to apply to be released. They have to allow them to apply. And this is where the fight, absolutely came in, because it is not that these people have to prove that they are no longer dangerous to society. The board has to assume that they are no longer dangerous to society. They have to prove that person is. And if they can't prove it, then the way that the legislature has been going, the majority party, is that, it's everything on the criminal side. And, there were two women that were from two of the five from the ISRB board that I sat in on they're the sex offender policy board, so they handle the violent sex offenders. And we were talking about that because there is a goal to, when a judge says you have to be supervised for the rest of your life because you are just that dangerous, there's people on this board and other individuals that are fighting for them to have less supervision, right, or eliminate it altogether because, it's mean to manage these people. And I am telling you that I am not seeing the compassion for our families in our neighborhoods, for our businesses. Where's that compassion?
Right.
So, I brought up the question while we were in that meeting, and I said, well, you keep saying that these people are not dangerous because they've spent, some time in jail. Well, they had a case in New York where the guy murdered multiple people, and they let him out because they said he was quote unquote rehabilitated. And apparently that no longer means that you have to apologize or take responsibility or really even care what you did. Now it's just a matter of you spent a certain amount of time in jail and you checked off a few boxes and you're magically now rehabilitated. But this man turned right around and murdered a woman. 83-year-old man murdered a woman, dismembered her body, and left her torso in a shopping cart at a Walmart. And when I brought that up, I said, well, wait a minute here. Do you guys not understand that just because somebody is older doesn't mean that they can't run over somebody with a car or stab them with a knife or shoot them with a gun or what? Age does not make a difference when it comes down, especially if they have an evil heart, like that man clearly did. And their answer was not to me, Representative Graham, you're right. We do have a responsibility to be careful. If we're going to release these people, we need to make sure that we are doing everything that we possibly can to make sure that the people in our neighborhoods are safe. Our businesses are safe, that these people are being put through the ringer to make sure that they're not going to do this again. I'm all for giving people second chances, but they have to hold up their end of the bargain.
Yep.
And when they don't, I am going to be the one that's going to throw the book at them because there's going to be victims on the other side of this, and they had a clear choice on whether they did it or not.
Right.
So, I'm just, their attitude was, well, there's always going to be outliers.
Well, the outlier is going to be when someone who is so overcome with rage goes and then exacts revenge on that person who ought to be in jail or prison. What happens? Do they get prosecuted then?
Yeah, they will.
And that's what happens. I mean,
because they're being told, and we're seeing this happen right now. There's a case that's going on in, again, New York, where I've watched the video of a store clerk being, he's an old man, and an immigrant being manhandled by a younger man, and it was all over a bag of chips that there was I guess she didn't have quite enough money to pay for it. And of course that clerk is responsible, right? So the man, came back and was just beating on this old man, and the old man, to try to protect himself, because let's face it, this man is really old, and the kid, and there's the young man with a violent history of assault. So the old man ends up stabbing this guy, and now he's the one in prison. He's the one that the prosecutors are throwing the book at because he stabbed the guy trying to save his life.
Well, that's a clear case of self-defense, if there ever is one.
But what is that message, though, that's being sent out? I guess they were saying, it was a $250,000 bail for this guy to get out. He didn't have that kind of money, right? But in the meantime, they'll bend over backwards to pay the bail for other people that are actually criminals, not somebody trying to stop from being murdered, because that guy, if you look at the video, he was totally capable of murdering that old man.
And probably would have if the old man hadn't defended himself.
Yeah. I mean, it was really troubling, absolutely troubling to see. But we are going to start seeing a lot more of this when people are getting put in a position where they call 911 and there's no officers to respond, or the officers' hands are handcuffed. Where they cannot do certain things. And I can tell you, because I'm a member of the Public Safety Committee, I've been in all of those hearings. It is not that we did not fight tooth and nail to try to bring some common sense, into if there's an officer that does something wrong, should they be held accountable? Yes. Just like a doctor or anybody else that does something criminal in their...
And to that point, no good police officer would tell you otherwise.
Right.
No good police officer would tell you, oh, no, I got you back, if they do something wrong. In fact, there's actually a lot of really good videos coming out from more and more departments having more and more pressure for body cams. There's more and more really good videos that they're starting to release where a good officer will correct a bad one. And then there's measures that are taken in place to punish them in the department, sometimes firing them even.
Right.
And so you're seeing more and more of this. So I'm an advocate. I do think that we should put body cams on every police officer because I think it protects them and it protects the public.
Right. Well, because you're seeing also the benefit, because we have those cameras, it protects the police too from there being, these accusations.
You just pulled me over because I'm black or Asian or whatever. And it's like, no, I have a valid reason for pulling you over and it's on camera.
Right. So there is that. But, you brought this up. This is also an issue where police now, again, their hands being handcuffed. You tell me when you're driving down the street and you see a car in front of you, if you can tell who's driving that car.
No.
Most people cannot. You can't tell. But you can tell if the car maybe is speeding or if it's changing lanes without a turn signal or, breaking the law of some sort. Those laws that we have apply to everybody.
Yep.
Everybody to keep us all safe on the road. So now, though, what we're dealing with in Washington State, which is lunacy, is that now these officers, if somebody is a person of color, the officer now has to be in a position of proving that he didn't pull that person over.
Right.
For that reason. Not that the person has to prove that they pulled him over for that. So now what does that tell you? We have now a certain segment of our community that will be treated one way and another segment that will be treated another way.
Right.
That does not do a lot for...
Well, it goes beyond having equal rights. It goes into privilege, and it's the claim that white people have privilege. But what we're seeing in reality is that the exact opposite is true. Is that minority groups, Black, Asian, and so on, they now have privilege because a couple pull me out. Let's say that they do see that who's in the car. Let's say that they do see that it's a Black guy or a white guy. The cop feels more comfortable pulling over the white guy because he's not going to be labeled a racist for doing so. It's like, even though his motive's pure because you committed a crime, it's like, well, if I pull over this Black guy, I'm going to be labeled a racist and all these other things. And I was just talking to John Knowles, and he said he had I believe it was John Knowles. He said he had someone who retired because he said, I'm not going to be that guy. I'm not going to be the guy who's being labeled a racist just because I'm doing my job. And it's not right. So
I know exactly how that feels, by the way.
Yeah. So let me, I'm sure you do.
I do. And it's not fun.
Let me jump to a question.
And it's not fair either.
Right. And let me jump to question 10 because we're kind of touching on this. American sovereignty. The statement is that our national sovereignty is vital to preserve our nation and allow it to advance its mission. Federal and state borders help define where resources and responsibilities are applied. Judeo-Christian values found in the United States Constitution and Declaration of Independence provide guidance for our laws and liberties. The abundant blessings that God has bestowed on the U.S. underscores the responsibility to be a good steward to its citizens and to the world. The issue application is that diversity, inclusive, and equity activists claim that the USA was founded on slavery and white male patriarchy. DIE activists often promote revisionist history while demanding race-based restitution schemes masquerading as DIE initiatives. The response is that DIE initiatives should be eliminated from all taxpayer-funded government agencies, and that new government initiatives should focus on unifying themes of American culture, i.e. freedom, individual rights, constitutional principles, etc. And you responded to 10 and said amen. And let me just preface this with, you don't know this, but a lot of the viewers will now if they've watched a few of the other interviews. My wife is black, and she has been pulled over many, many times in Spokane County for various things. Your tail lights out. Tabs is the one that I claim because I'm the one that has to renew the tabs and I forget. And she has never once said, "Oh, I got pulled over because I was black." Not one time. Even if it is a case where the officer can clearly see who is driving the vehicle, he pulls her over and it's always a cordial exchange. And he always says, it's always, "Hey, your tab's out. Hey, did you know your back light's out? Did you know this?"
Right.
It's always a cordial exchange. And she just says, "You know what? I did not know that. And I'm going to call my husband right now and I'm going to talk to him and let him know." Because she doesn't know how to change a bulb. She doesn't know how to, she doesn't deal with tabs and things. And I do that for her. And so, but she's never one time came home to me and said, "This police officer was really, it seemed like he was prejudiced." Not one time. Not one time. Has she ever said that in Spokane County? And I am a firm believer that most, not all, that most officers, the large majority, 90 to 95%, do not have any bias and do not racially discriminate. And I'm a firm believer that, yes, there are bad eggs just like there are everywhere in anything. There's some in the state legislature.
And it does not have a skin color either, by the way.
That is, amen. It does not.
It has nothing to do with skin color. It has everything to do with heart and character.
Right. And racism is a learned trait. You are not born racist. It is a learned trait, or it is something that you may, there's something in your community growing up that it was us v them sort of thing. My wife's seen it from both sides. She's half white, half black, so she gets it from both sides.
Yeah.
And she's seen it through high school and so on, but she would not stand here and sit here and tell you that America is institutionally racist and that every police officer is a racist. It is a fabrication. It is a lie to divide and conquer. That is it. It's to divide us from each other and stop us from coming to the table on these common issues that we outlined: the constitutional rights, freedom, liberty. It's to divide us and say, no, you don't have liberty because you're black. Only white people have liberty. So meet your oppressor and meet your victim. And you're going, hold on a second, I don't even know this person. We don't see color. I certainly don't see color. I see character. Like you said, I see character.
That's how we were raised.
Yeah, we were. And that's how... And now, don't get me wrong. There are instances of racism that happen, but it is not institutional. And I would argue, and I would even stand by and put my hand on the Bible, that if there was an instance of racism, that the community at large, white people included, would fight, and you see this actually every day, would fight against that instance of racism.
Yeah.
And if racism were institutional, the community at large, including white people, will stand in defense of minorities that are being oppressed. And we do. Institutional racism is not anymore. It died with Jim Crow. Truly, I truly believe that. It died with Jim Crow. Now, individual instances, sure.
Well, see, the problem, though, is we are seeing this now rearing its ugly head. There are schools now in Washington State that are having separate meetings for African American families and then separate meetings for everybody else. No. Why? Why would we do that? It's going back to what we were trying to stop. That when you love people as human beings, that we look out after each other, that we care for each other. And one of the things, because I have traveled to different countries. And I know what it's like to be a minority in that other country. I've gotten a good taste of that.
Right.
So I've absolutely had the racism come my way. I get it. It's wrong. I don't care who does it. But I have also seen wonderful things happen, that people are people. And, our family is blended. We have a blended family. And, we have a great family. I know lots of people that have blended families, great people. And that's what, that is the thing that I see. Because when I was growing up, I did see some of that. But I also learned, though, what the difference was, right? And so that got stomped out very quickly. And it didn't matter what we all said, that's not right. And I think that's what that takes is, good people, not being afraid to stand up and say, that, hey, that's not right, don't do that, kind of thing. But we also have to, when we see it go in the other direction, be willing to, because our communities are being hurt. Our schools, our kids are suffering in our schools with a lot of this stuff that is going on. So now, instead of being able to focus on reading, writing, arithmetic, spelling, life skills that will help these kids be able to take care of themselves and families, they're in turmoil with what it is that's going on. And that's not going to change until the adults start getting involved. To say, no, these kids need a safe environment to learn, and academic excellence needs to be the focus.
Yes. And I heard a story that there was a little girl, I think she was 6 or 7. She went home and she was clearly bothered by something. And her mom said, what's wrong? And she said, am I evil? And her mom said, no. Well, why would you ask that? No, why? And she says, well, because I'm white. And and it comes back to these policies. What are we teaching our kids? Right. Those kids don't see color. Right. Those kids don't see that. They play together in the playground where they're being taught these things. They're being taught you're an oppressor and you're a victim. Right. And then we have to, as a society, I'm not talking culturally. Well, I am talking culturally, but I'm saying societally, we have to come together and say, yes, we acknowledge that we come from different cultures and we can honor those cultures without dividing each other from them. Let's welcome each other into these cultures. Let's say, if I'd gladly go to a black barbecue and just hang out.
Oh,
and
sure,
yeah. I mean, And,
I mean, I'm serious. We have friends that are different nationalities. I mean, it's wonderful. You get to see different traditions and you get to celebrate, with them and enjoy different food. And I don't know. I just think that I enjoy being able to experience those things, and, I mean, it is kind of comical because my mom was one that was really kind of picky about her food. And I didn't raise my kids that way. I raised them that you need to at least try it. If you don't like the way it looks or whatever, that's okay, but at least try it. And if you don't like it, I'm not going to force you to eat it. Right. But if you don't adapt that kind of thinking in your life, you never try new things. You have a harder time, I think, learning new things because you get kind of stuck in maybe beliefs and, things that you're in your box and you don't want to come out of your comfort zone. Exactly. It's being comfortable. Comfort zone. That's a good thing. Yeah, you're in your comfort zone. That's what you're talking about. So and the Supreme Court overruled Roe v. Wade or overturned it and essentially gave the power back to the states. And so now I believe that the state legislature, that your job is more important than ever. Because we now have the ability to really sit down and look at the abortion laws and really hammer home how important life is. So I'm just going to read from the survey question 4 of life. God created man in his image. The duty of civil government is the protection of innocent human life from conception until natural death. The issue application is that Washington state's reproductive privacy rights law allows minors to obtain abortions without parental consent. Additionally, this law requires taxpayer-funded abortions on demand. Late-term abortions are legal throughout all 9 months of pregnancy in Washington because of the vague way that viability is defined in the law. The response is that the reproductive privacy rights law needs to be challenged and or repealed at both the state and local levels. You responded 10 and you said, not everyone believes in God.
common sense, or protecting innocent life. We are living in a world in which children are now celebrating the murder of other children. Interestingly, some support abortion for a tubal pregnancy and other issues very early, or birth control. The same people in growing numbers do not support partial birth abortions or infanticide after being born alive. I am pro-life and pro-choice, including abstinence, birth control, fixing our adoption system, fixing our foster care, giving a hand to mothers that keep their babies, amen, and keeping fathers in homes whenever possible, except with abuse. And so, I mean, you really touched on a lot of the key problems that you're going to face in the legislature. You're going to have what about this? What about that? What about this? And so are you already seeing some movement on this? Are you already seeing some things getting pushed through? What's it looking like right now on the legislative level?
Well, I'm sure. Well, first of all, I'm going to kind of back up just a little bit. I want to go back to Roe v. Wade and the Supreme Court justices. Sure. And, I'm understanding that, even Ruth Bader Ginsburg had mentioned that she felt that they made a mistake, that they did not feel that this should have been decided by the Supreme Court because it's not a constitutional issue.
Right. So you don't have the constitutional right to abortion.
It's not right. It's not in the Constitution as a right.
Right.
So that's all they did was to say, we're looking at this and we're saying that this should be at a local level. This should go back to the states where you have the people and their elected representatives that are deciding these issues. Mm-hmm. So in Washington State, and I can tell you because I'm hitting a lot of doors. I'm very active, and I'm not afraid to ask hard questions. I don't shy away from the really tough issues. So what I'm hearing at the door was part of it was confusion, not because they didn't understand. I mean, there was an interview that I did with King 5, and just even speaking, with some of the reporters, not necessarily aware of what the law in Washington State already is. Mm-hmm. So I think the most of the people that I know, that I've gone to a door, doesn't matter if it's Democrat, Republican, Independent, doesn't matter. Most people they're not aware that there was a people's initiative in the 70s that passed, making abortion legal. Mm-hmm. Then they came back in the 90s and made some more changes. And now this last session, there was Governor Inslee signed a bill where if you are aiding and providing abortion, that the father or the family can't sue you, that type of thing. So this is already law. So by Governor Inslee or Patty Murray or anybody else, stirring up fear about now all of a sudden, everything has changed, and that's not true. Mm-hmm. The law is right now the law, and it's the people that put that law into place. Mm-hmm. If it's going to be changed, I'm going to guess that it's going to be the people that are going to work to put those parameters there. Mm-hmm. So fair, and I think the way that I want to talk about this is I'm going to base what I'm talking about based on the doors that I've been hitting, mm-hmm. the conversations that I've been having, whether it's in a grocery store, a salon, at a business, at a door. These conversations are coming up. Mm-hmm. And what really kind of surprised me, and maybe I guess it shouldn't, is number one, that most people don't support what they see as murder.
Right.
They don't support that, right? So and I mean, I have had talks with people that are older. I've had talks with very young, teenagers or young adults about this, and one woman comes to mind, I'm going to say probably early 20s, really angry, really, really, really angry, and totally uninformed about, what's the law in Washington State? How does this affect her? And, I guess what I kind of learned along the way is rather than trying to push my views on somebody about what I think is right, because, the other thing we're not talking about is free will. God gives us free will. He has, rules that for 10 commandments. But at the end of the day, there is free will that we are accountable. I believe in God. He's the reason why I'm here doing what I'm doing. It's not about me, it's through me, and I know that. But there are people that do not believe in God. They don't have the same values that way. And they're a lot harder. It's easier to try to talk to somebody when you have the same values.
Right.
It is much harder when they are in a totally different mindset. And if you come at it and you are argumentative or angry, it's going to shut down that conversation every time, and you're not going to get anywhere.
Amen.
But I just simply asked her some questions, just like I did at the doors. Well, how do you feel about this? Well, how do you feel about that? And I think she genuinely, and I think that, I'm a survivor of abortion. My mom was one of these young women growing up when she did that. It was shame for the family, and her father wanted her to have an abortion and was really pushing her towards that. But she made the decision that she did not want to kill her baby. She did what she had to do to keep me, and I'm grateful to her for that. Our life was hard because we didn't get help from her father until later. He did end up loving me, right? So he called me his queen bee. So I know that I was definitely, and I loved him with all my heart. He's still very special in my life. He passed away, so, our life ended up coming back around. I have a great life, with my mom, so there was definitely some things that were great in that situation. That's why it's always best to have kids when you are ready to have kids, when you are, hopefully married
Right.
and settled, and you want those kids because there are some people that have children that don't want them. And, the kids and society end up paying the price for that. So that's, again, where that adoption system comes in. Hopefully that's, what I was talking to her about was, I'm a survivor of abortion. This is what my mom went through.
Right.
Should she have been forced by her father to do this? How do you feel about that? How would you feel if your parents were forcing you to do this? And you could see that she was kind of stopping to think about that, for a minute.
Right.
And, and then, we talked about also there being a huge difference between, and again, I'm coming from this point, and everybody is different on where they're at with this issue, and life experience that helps shape what are your beliefs around this.
Right.
Has a lot to do with how you grow up and the things that you experience. And so for me, when it comes to that issue, we did talk about there is somebody that has a child because they are irresponsible. Maybe they didn't take their birth control, or they just didn't abstain,
Or it failed because they took antibiotics with it.
Exactly, and they didn't know that. I mean, I can tell you there are people that didn't know you were not supposed to take antibiotics.
My sister got pregnant that way.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, so there are things that that do happen when somebody is not expecting it. But that is, again, far different from a violent rape which
Right.
I experienced that, and when you're that person that's on that shower floor, scrubbing your skin raw, trying to feel clean after what happened to you. I don't care if you're male, female, it does not matter. If you have not had that happen to you, you can't begin to fathom the horror of that.
Right.
And if you're trying to scrub that off of your skin and you end up finding out that you're pregnant, there are some people that are able to say, okay, well, this happened, and I now have a baby inside of me, and I can't raise this baby. I can't keep the baby, but I will give the baby up for adoption. And then you have other situations where the attack was so violent and traumatizing that if that person can't deal with that, then you run the risk of them committing suicide. Then you lose the baby and the mother.
Yeah.
And so, there's been, that is a situation that I truly do believe belong, with the doctor and the mother at that point in time. But again, I wish though that there were also options available, that when that person is facing this, and I'll be honest with you, when you go through hard things like a rape or a murder or things like that, you have family and friends around you that don't know how to handle that. They don't know what to say to you. Yeah. They don't know how to help. They don't know how to fix it.
It's not okay, right?
Right. So, and so a lot of times they will either not talk about it or they just quit coming around. They just are not involved anymore.
Right.
And so now that person is isolated, right? So now they're scared, they're isolated, and that help that they would hope would be there is not necessarily there. This is...
And I want to actually say something because a story comes to mind, and we'll get back to it. And then to your point about people not knowing what to say, I heard a story of a gentleman who had lost his daughter, and his friend was trying everything and so on. And I think there was they come over and he'd said something like, "Oh, it'll be okay," and the guy's like, "It won't be okay," kind of get out of my house. And then later, when things have calmed down, he said, "You don't understand. I didn't need you to say anything. I just needed you to be there.
Be there, yes.
Just your presence here was enough. That's all I needed. I needed your arm around me.
Right.
Don't say a word. I just needed you there."
Yeah, just be there, just listen. Hey, maybe can I help you out with some chores around the house? Can I help you with groceries? Hey, if you need to talk and it's 3:00 in the morning, call me. That's the kind of support that they need. You can't fix it. You cannot fix it. And it isn't going to be okay. That does not ever, ever, ever go away. You learn how to live with the pain, and everybody handles that differently.
Right.
For me, I handle that in that when I have these anniversaries come up, because I can't spend that time with my family. I had a sister that was murdered and a brother that committed suicide because of the abuse that we suffered. So there's some major losses there.
Right.
And
along with the trauma you felt too.
Exactly. And again, with me trying to pick up the broken pieces of my life and put them back together. But when you get that support and when you get that help to be able to do that, and that beautiful mosaic comes back together again, there is life after these horrible things that happen. And it's partly why I do what I do too, because there are people that have horrible things happen in their life, right? And they can go through their life thinking maybe that they're less than, or maybe they don't deserve to be happy, or, these things. And when they see other people that have gone through hard things too, but, they have been able to choose to live a happy, productive life and make a difference for other people, that's creating hope out of thin air.
Right.
Right.
Out of your turmoil. You're turning your turmoil
Exactly.
to hope. Right?
And, and so I guess I deal with the sadness by, I will, because I can't buy them a present. I can't take them out to dinner. I can't do those things for them, So I will choose instead to maybe buy somebody a bag of groceries, or I'll buy them a coffee, or maybe I'll find an old person, an elderly person that needs a utility bill paid or something along those lines. They do not know that that's my motivation. They don't know, that that's what it is. But when you see the smile on their face and you see the joy, that comes out of heartbreak, that is a way that, that I get through this. This is what allows me to get up, day after day after day and keep trying, to make a difference, for the right reasons, right? Life isn't perfect. It's not black and white. Sometimes it's what we make it, and sometimes we don't have control over what happens, but we do have control over how we deal with it, and again, part of that comes from community. That we support each other and we're there in the ways that we can be.
There's an old saying, life is 20% what happens to you, 80% how you respond.
Yeah.
And, I think that a large part is trying to show people Christ in everything that we do, regardless of the circumstances that we may even be in. Because a lot of things are you're reacting because you're angry about something else, so you're reacting to someone about something they don't even are involved in. It's just you take, maybe you have a bad day at work and you go home to your wife or your husband and you just snappy with them, and they didn't do anything to you, but
right.
They are the ones that are saying that, and it is a very difficult position because it's my mom was raped by her grandfather over and over again, and she actually protected her sister from being raped by just essentially saying, no, if you're going to do it to me, not her. Her youngest sister, and so she kind of protected her from that, and that created a two victim position because my mom was a victim of the sexual assault, but my aunt was a victim of guilt because she knew my mom was protecting her. And both of them have struggled throughout their entire adulthood. And my mom still struggles to this day with some issues that stem from that. And, I just encourage her to seek counseling, get counseling. You need to talk through these things and so on. And we won't know. I have no idea what that was like for her. And it, like you said, it's impossible for anyone, man or woman, to determine or to know what that person is feeling, and to project our opinions onto them is difficult. One thing I will say, though, because you said that, these laws have been on the books for decades in the state of Washington. But now that I guess the difference is that the state can't just look to, so now if we try to change the law, and we do try to get back to the table on this issue, and we do try to restrict and even give, let's say we restrict and give exception and so on. Now the difference is that the state can't look to the federal government and say, well, there's precedent at the federal level, so we can fight this all the way to the Supreme Court, but we'll win because of Roe v. Wade. Well, now they can't do that, right?
Right. Well, and so I'm going to go back to, the young woman that I was talking about, because again, there was a lot of anger coming from, multiple people about that, there is fear. And again, it's coming from being uninformed. It's coming from, we have such a divide, and I have talked with people that are on very over here on one side where they don't believe in birth control, they do not believe in abortion for any reason whatsoever. It does not matter. And then you have the other side which is I think why we've gotten where we are, that it has been pushed so far now to abortion right up until birth and even after birth. Now we're deciding. So the baby survived, but now the mother decides whether that baby's going to live or not. And so this is what I was talking about, at the doors and with this young woman, asking, the questions about that. And, it caused her to stop and think about that, and so I don't believe that I am ever going to change her mind regarding abortion. I just don't see that happening. But what I will tell you is that we were able to talk about, okay, well, if we're talking about just abortion, that's not a choice. That's just pro-abortion. That's all that is.
Right.
That's not pro-choice. It's pro-abortion. Let's talk about pro-choices, okay? Let's talk
Plural.
Exactly. Let's talk about, what this situation is, because at the door, again, I was running into people that they support birth control to have a family when they decide they want to have a family. That's family planning. Or they decide to be abstinent, until they decide that they want to get married, and have a family. And then you have the rape situation that we're talking about. Same people would somewhat support maybe, the day after pill or something along those lines, because there's a huge difference. And I personally believe in life begins at conception.
Amen.
Right? But again, there is a huge difference between you have like the day after versus a fully formed baby that can live on their own. That they, if you were to give them a C-section, that baby could survive. Right. So I have a son that was born at 27 weeks, and he couldn't have survived on his own without help. But because he got that help, he did survive. Right. And that was part of the conversation that we had, that if your dad dropped over and had a heart attack right now, there is you got to render aid. If there are paramedics or medical people, they have to render aid to try to save that person.
Well, even if you give birth to a 9-month-old healthy baby, you still have to feed the baby. You still have to take care of it, change the diaper. So the baby still needs aid in order to grow to be self-sufficient. So viability isn't really, to me, an argument, because at what point are you viable, right? 2, 3, 4 years old.
Well, right. But there were, I watched a thing where the woman just kept saying it's the mother's choice. And then the person interviewing that person said, well, what if it's 2-year-old? And the woman came back and said, it's the mother's choice. And I'm like, really?
Wow.
No.
Wow.
No. But that's what I'm saying, though. This is what has people so polarized right now, is that, and again, there's hope, because the same people that I was talking to that support abortion were absolutely vehemently against once you get past a certain point, because we are outliers we're right now aligning with China and also with North Korea when it comes to, abortion, where in a lot of these other countries, you go up to a certain point and then there's a 3-day waiting period. You have to go through counseling, and they don't go past that unless there is some sort of reason for that. So, again, these are important kitchen table conversations that we need to be able to have, because I was able to take a really angry young woman and just ask her some questions, just have a conversation with her, and, get her to think, okay, well, yeah, I could support fixing our adoption system. Yeah. Because that's a choice.
And I think everyone agrees with that. Yeah.
Right. I could support, helping to, support a mother or even a father that decides that he wants to keep that child.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And we never talk about the where's the father's right to choose.
Right. So, and, we're in this position that, I know that I can have people that, are absolutely against abortion. And, I understand where they are coming from. But I hope that, maybe through this conversation that, they are seeing that not everybody believes the way that they do. And, we can fight about this, or we can figure out a way to actually help. We can figure out a way to say, okay, we got to do everything that we possibly can to try to reduce abortion as much as we possibly can. But I'm not a doctor. There could be something that happens that is, again, between the doctor and that person.
Right.
And it is the family's choice to have to make that choice. Now, do I love the stories where I hear that the family is presented with this choice and they decide to keep the baby and everything turns out okay? Those are great stories.
Those are the stories we don't talk about.
These are the stories, well, I see them, and I talk about them.
I was meaning community at large when we talk about these things.
But you don't hear about them as much.
Right.
They do exist, but there are also other situations that happen where the babies don't survive. I know that because I spent time in the NICU with my son born at 27 weeks. And I can tell you that it was absolutely heartbreaking that you go there and you're trying to spend time with your child, because they can hear your voice, they know you're there.
Right.
But you are also very close to other families that their children aren't doing very well. Maybe they're pulling the plug that day.
Wow.
Or you see these parents that you've been meeting every day while you're seeing, and they're walking out with a little bag of toys because their baby didn't make it. I just wish that we
I wasn't even
could
there.
be maybe a little bit more compassionate towards each other and really take this passion and turn it towards offering some real solutions.
Instead of just saying this is bad. It's like, well, let's do something.
Right.
Let's act.
Right. Yeah. There are a lot of things that we can do. And, that's, I guess, I can't, with where we are in Washington State, unless the law changes, I cannot stop somebody from exercising their free will under our laws the way that they are right now. But one thing I can darn sure do is do everything that I possibly can do to, hopefully help them know that they do have other options. And then, there is a choice at that point. It's not just pro-abortion at that point.
Right. Well, amen. I mean, I agree with you, and I hope that we can come to some common sense and biblically grounded and morally grounded laws in this state about where we are with abortion, and then look at fixing the foster care system and the adoption system. I mean, it's so expensive to adopt that people go overseas and adopt overseas because they really want to have a child, but it's so hard and it's so expensive and so lengthy that that people struggle, and they and these are people who typically can't have children or just want to do the right thing, and we make it so hard for them.
Well, the state is making it very hard for foster parents too.
Yeah.
And shame on the legislature for not doing more to ease that. Because we've got kids that are they're putting them in hotel rooms. We've got kids that are aging out of foster care system. We need to be taking care of the children that we have here.
Right.
Right. If we fix our adoption system and we're taking care of the kids that we have here and somebody wants to adopt, great.
Right.
But I just cannot see where the common sense comes in that we deny these kids, a family and, a future, where they're not alone, that they could actually find a family, I just, like I said, I would hope that would be something that we could all come together and support.
And I think the average person, no matter how they lean politically, would agree with you. I think that anyone wants these things, any true-hearted human being, regardless if you're a Christian or not, really can look at the good that can come out of these programs when they're running properly, when they're not bogged down in restriction and legislation and so on. So I really appreciate you coming on, Jenny. It was a pleasure to meet you. Can you let people know how to get in touch with you if they have any questions?
Yeah, sure. So my number, if you wanted to get a hold of me, my number, it's 509-505-7366. The email address is Jenny, Jenny, at votejennygraham.com. And then I also have a website that is www.votejennygraham.com, where you could also find more information.
Okay. So votejennygraham.com? Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Bye-bye.